Hello, everyone, and welcome in to another episode of the RTI Recruiting Podcast. I am Nathaniel Rutherford, the managing editor of RockyTopInsider.com, and I am joined this episode by a special guest at VR2, Brandon Martin. We had Matt Ray on the last episode, and he got to talk a little bit about what he saw with Caden Salter at the Elite 11. We talked a little bit about some other targets and stuff, too, so if you haven't checked that out yet, please do. Matt had a front row seat in Nashville to watch stuff over there, so he obviously shared a lot for VR2, which is part of the Sports Illustrated family. But he was kind enough to come on the podcast last week and share some stuff with us as well, and hopefully you guys have listened to that. If you haven't yet, check it out. Got Brandon back on here with us. Hopefully one day we'll get all three of us on a podcast together again, Brandon, to have you guys on as guests here for the RTI Recruiting Podcast. But we're going to talk about some of Tennessee's top targets moving forward over the next, month or so, because there's three guys who are right at or near the top of Tennessee's list in the 2021 class, who all had some news kind of happen this weekend for them, where they all kind of made some announcements. Two of them, when they're going to commit, and one of them released his top 5 schools. We'll go ahead and touch on, I think, probably the better news for Tennessee here, the one I think we both would agree on Tennessee's in the better spot with than the other two. But I wanted to say Smael Mondon put his top 5 teams out over the weekend, and Tennessee is right there with them. You got Tennessee, Auburn, LSU, Georgia, Florida. A lot of people for a long time have kind of assumed that Smael Mondon will be, head of the Georgia, that he's an in-state kid for them. He Bulldogs tend to clean up in-state. A lot of times they get a lot of their top targets in the state of Georgia, and a lot of the highly-rated 4 and 5 stars in the state. I, however, from everything who I've talked to, and I think you've probably echoed this too, and people you all have talked to, Brandon, I feel like it's almost an Auburn, Tennessee, and then Georgia kind of battling third in this position, and I think with maybe an outside shot of a Florida for there. But to me, it seems like it's Tennessee and Auburn kind of the 1A, 1B, or 1-2 kind of battle for him, with Georgia fighting third in this point. And I don't know that he ends up at Georgia. He could obviously still end up at Georgia. That wouldn't shock me if he did. But at this point, he's done a very good job of keeping it very close to the vest. He hasn't done a lot of interviews. He hasn't really, given a lot away, him and his camp, neither one. So it's really hard to tell which way he's really leaning. But from even the interviews he has done and stuff, and from what little information is out there, I think Auburn and Tennessee are the ones kind of battling neck and neck, with Georgia definitely not going away, but with Georgia, Florida, and LSU kind of bringing up the third, fourth place kind of area right there.
Yeah, Nathaniel, I agree with you. I think it's I don't want to say a 2-horse race, but I think Tennessee and Auburn are pretty clearly your front runners in this race. I think Georgia's probably a solid third ahead of the other two, ahead of Florida and LSU, but it sure sounds like it's Tennessee and Georgia right now. Or excuse me, Tennessee and Auburn right now. An interesting thing about Auburn that has come up, or rather, excuse me, about Georgia that's come up, is Jamon Dumas-Johnson. He's an outside linebacker at St. Francis Academy, where Tennessee fans should be very, very well acquainted. Tennessee has done well there this cycle. They've got 2 guys committed there currently, in Katron Evans and Aaron Willis. Dominic Bailey was from St. Francis last season. There's 3 pretty highly rated guys. Tennessee has offered other guys at St. Francis. They have got more guys they have offered up there in the 2022 class. It's pretty evident the Vols are trying to put a pipeline in up there. Jamon Dumas-Johnson is another St. Francis linebacker. He's an outside linebacker. He's a 4-star backer, and he's highly rated, who has suddenly started trending to Georgia. Mm-hmm. A lot of the buzz is picking up that maybe Georgia for him. That's what it sounds like. Now, obviously, you could land multiple good linebackers and take it, especially at a school like Georgia. We've seen Tennessee do it last year. We've seen Tennessee do it this year. But to kind of suddenly see this uptick as Mondon cuts his list, and with everybody sort of feeling like Mondon is down to maybe Tennessee and Auburn, this may be another indication that Tennessee could be pulling ahead here, that Georgia may feel like they have lost out on lost out on Mondon or losing out on Mondon and going ahead and trying to make a very, very good backup plan. He's a very good Dumas Johnson's a very good linebacker. He's a good athlete. Would fit there well. Any SEC team would be glad to have him. I don't want to make it sound like I'm calling this young man a backup plan and putting him down, because he can play. He can really play. But he's not Smael Mondon.
Right.
Mondon's special. I've joked with Matt and a few of the other guys that God only makes so many of those. Mm-hmm. And I think this may be an instance where Georgia's realizing we better start putting in a contingency plan that we feel good about, because we feel like we're losing ground here.
Yeah, and with that too, you mentioned you can get multiple good linebackers. Tennessee's done it before. They've currently have it in this class, and Georgia, if they get Dumas Johnson, they'll have both him and Chaz Chambliss as outside linebackers in their class. They, from what I've gathered from different people who cover Georgia recruiting, they're taking anywhere between 3 to 5, maybe you try to get 4 linebackers in this class. But I don't know that they need 4 true outside linebackers. And maybe Jason Dumas Johnson, he plays inside because he does have that build to where he can play an inside backer role as well. But just because if he goes to Georgia, which looks like he is, it doesn't mean that obviously Georgia's out of the race for Smael Mondon. But as you have said, and as I'll echo here too, it certainly makes it look better for both Tennessee and Auburn that Georgia's taking someone else who is very good, as you said, but is probably was a little bit further down their list than a Smael Mondon. Obviously, we don't know. We don't know when he's gonna make an announcement. He mentioned June before about doing something, then he didn't. He pushed back what he's going to do his top 5, and he did it this month. I don't know that we'll see Smael Mondon really announce anything later this month or anything like that. He's he can afford to take his time. He's a guy that a school will hold a position. He will
have a spot.
Yeah, Tennessee and Auburn both will hold a position for him up until the day that you can sign. I guess not the first week of February, because you can sign later on than that. Bryce Thompson did that and Zach Evans did that. They will hold a spot for Smael Mondon as long as possible if he doesn't decide to sign in December or sign in February. But I think he is. I think he's scheduled to be an early enrollee. But point is, he can do what he wants to. He's got the leverage in this situation. So I'll be interested to see kind of when he does decide to go ahead and announce. But right now, the feeling, and this could definitely change, any time between now and whenever he announces. But right now, the feeling is it's Tennessee and Auburn, and I think Tennessee has done an exceptionally good job of recruiting him. He's been to campus multiple times. I think it was with an interview. I think it was on 247 Sports where he was interviewed and said this, talking about he's been there enough. He only said this about 2 schools. He said about Auburn and Tennessee, essentially saying that he feels comfortable enough to call those places home. He's been to Tennessee enough to where he can call it home. He has a great relationship with Brian Niedermeyer. And then he mentioned with Auburn that he feels like he'd call that place home as well because of the relationships he has there, and he's been there pretty often too. So I think he does a really good job in interviews, not giving away things. And again, his camp specifically has done a really good job of not giving out information. But I just think from what he said and from the intel that we both have gotten and things like that too, it just seems like Mondon is down to it's right now. As of right now, it's Auburn and Tennessee, and I like Tennessee's chances, but buddy, Tennessee's won some head-to-head battles with Auburn in the recruiting trail, but they've lost enough of them that would make me very, very worried.
Well, I would say you're thinking the same thing I am. Highly athletic linebacker that can play all over the field. Guy you look at and go, he could be a middle linebacker or outside linebacker or safety or star. Just unbelievable athlete, 5-star. Everybody in the country wants him. Out of Georgia, comes down to Tennessee and Auburn. Sound like the Owen Pappoe recruitment to you?
Yeah, the only thing missing was Pappoe was committed to Auburn for the longest time. At least he's not committed to Auburn. But yeah, that was obviously exactly who I was thinking of.
Yeah, that's the one that I keep going back to. Now, I think Tennessee may be in a position where things are a little different than they were with Pappoe. You got to remember when Pappoe chose Auburn, Tennessee was coming off of another 5-7 season. Mm-hmm. They had another year where nobody got drafted. Now, since then, they've been able to see a lot of those same guys that didn't get drafted go to the NFL and have really considerable success, which I think shows what Jeremy Pruitt probably could have done with one more year with those guys. But Tennessee was still struggling. It was still a lot of questions. It was still, what is this team going to look like under Jeremy Pruitt? What's it going to develop into? And Papo had his relationships. The linebacker coach at Auburn, whose name escapes me right now.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Was it T. Will?
Yeah, everybody called T. Will. Everybody calls him T. Will, but I couldn't remember his actual first name. That relationship with T. Will was big there, and I think if you look at Tennessee's staff at that time, Papo was a guy they would have loved to have gotten, but I feel like they had to sort of prioritize some other positions. I'm not saying they didn't prioritize Papo because they threw everything but the kitchen sink at him, but they had to get bigger on the offensive line. They had to get bigger on the defensive line. They had to fix that offensive line. That class was a huge rebuild, get everything put together class. And as we know, Tennessee had some guys on that staff that didn't recruit quite as well as the guys they've got now. Now you look at Tennessee and Auburn has, despite having more success than Tennessee on the field in those 2 seasons, Auburn's won more games. They've had more success, but for some reason, Gus Malzahn's in hotter water than Jeremy Pruitt is. I can't figure out the whole Gus Malzahn go win 9-10 games, flirt with the playoff, win your division, beat Alabama, and they still want him fired. I can't figure that out. But that coaching issue right there is bubbling at Auburn. I think that's something that other teams would be smart to exploit, the fact that, look, if he has a bad season, he's gone. Because they're trying to get rid of him after seasons that a lot of teams would give their eye teeth to have. Tennessee now, you can go, look, we beat Auburn head-to-head. Now, they were able to say that year, but they've got some more success to build on. But the last time we played, even when we were down, we beat Auburn. Look at the turnaround this team has had. Look at the way that the defensive players have grown under this coaching staff. Look at how the whole team has grown under this coaching staff. Look at the way we ended the season. Look at the talent that we have added in. Another top 10 class. They're putting together another really outstanding class. You've got a chance to come in and be a part of arguably the best linebacking core or the best linebacking class in the nation. And if you get Smael Mondon, Terrence Lewis, Aaron Willis, if you find me a class better than that, I'm here for it. Because and then Dylan Brooks is an outside linebacker, edge rusher, but that's 4 outstanding linebackers. Tennessee's able to go, Daniel Batuli signed with the Rams. Darrell Taylor, 2nd-round draft pick. He's an outside linebacker, edge rusher, but that's a guy who got drafted high. Tennessee's able to start showing the progress they've made. I think that makes this recruitment a little bit different. And this staff has had longer to work Mondon than they had to work Papo. So I think it's going to be interesting, but I feel like Tennessee has the edge in this right now.
That's what I I do too, but it feels weird to say that because I don't know. It's still I wouldn't say early. We're in July at this point, so it's still we're less than halfway to the earliest IM period, which is when he's likely to sign. Things can change, but I'm with you. I want to give the very, very, very slight edge to Tennessee. But again, I was just running through, as you were talking, Brandon, I was running through some of Auburn's commits over the last, I think, like 3 or 4 cycles, and it just was baffling to me to see how many guys, Tennessee wasn't, Papo's kind of the biggest one. I think him and Jay Hardy, obviously, are the 2 biggest examples you can point to, but there are multiple kids throughout the last 3 or 4 years that Tennessee has really would really have liked to have had their class who ended up at Auburn, who Tennessee went head-to-head with Auburn. And yes, Tennessee won their fair share of battles. You look at Wanya Morris as kind of, I think, the most notable example recently of, a guy who
Amari Thomas is in there too.
Yeah, Amari Thomas too. Those are two guys that Auburn really wanted and Tennessee ended up getting. But there's just, Vol fans know that they've been burned before with Auburn, so it's never, you can never rest easy when Auburn's the team you're going head to head with. But I would agree with you right now that I think Tennessee right now has the very slight edge with Smael Mondon. But he's not the only 5-star who had some news that Tennessee's targeting over the weekend here. The other one was Amarius Mims. Arguably, even though he's not rated the number one offensive tackle in the country, you could arguably say he's the number one offensive tackle in this cycle. One of the top players, period, the top player in the state of Georgia on 247 Sports, in the composite rankings at least. He announced that he will be committing on August 15th. Brandon, this one I don't feel great about. We talked, I think it was, in the middle of when Tennessee was going on their major run in May and June. And Tennessee did do a good job of getting back into things with Mims, and we talked about how we both were thinking Tennessee was wasting their time there. But it does seem like Tennessee's at least a team he's talking to and considering. But this one, just like with almost said Owen Papo, with Smael Mondon, it feels to me like this is a almost a 2-team race, and it feels like it's Alabama and Georgia for Mims. I don't think Tennessee is going to be able to make up enough ground between now and then to get him. And I also understand why he wouldn't choose Tennessee. I was having a conversation with someone on Twitter about it the other day. I mean, if you're Mims and you're expecting to come in and play immediately, look at Tennessee's tackle situation. They have 2 guys who, when he comes in as a true freshman, will be juniors in Wanya Morris and Darnell Wright. And unless they end up moving Wright over to guard, which I think is a possibility, but I don't think, you can make that promise to him necessarily. Unless they move, Darnell over to guard, Mims isn't going to come in and play immediately, most likely, at least not tackle. And I think, obviously that's where he wants to play. So if I'm him, you look at Alabama, who's losing, is it Leatherwood? I think it's the guy's name, who's their left tackle. He's a junior, so he's, for sure, I would say, going to go early after this season. He's got a chance to come in and play immediately at Alabama. He's got a chance to come in and play pretty early. I think at Georgia as well, if I remember their offensive line situation. I've never thought that Tennessee was, at any point leading for Mims. I never thought Tennessee was, making up enough ground where they could lead for Mims. I thought they did a good job of getting back into things when it looked like, that maybe, as we've said before on the podcast, Brandon, that they're wasting their time. But, I mean, you still got a month. Anything can happen in a month, and maybe he changes his mind and pushes back his commitment date because he originally was going to do it on his birthday in October and decided to do it in August. So maybe he, changes his mind again. But at this point in time, I don't think Tennessee gets Mims, but you and I are talking before we hit record. That doesn't mean Tennessee is going to miss out on getting a potentially really good tackle in this class, though.
No, I think when you're talking about Mims right now, when we talked about Smael Mondon, we sort of said it was Tennessee and Auburn, Georgia's third, and then Florida, LSU, and then everybody else. I think for Mims, it's very much Georgia and Alabama, and I think Tennessee is in that third spot with Mims that Georgia's in with Mondon. I think they're still there. They're in the discussion. I wouldn't be completely and totally stunned if Tennessee were to pull this off, but it's a longer shot right now. It would be an upset. It wouldn't be a stunning upset, but it would be an upset. It would be a surprise if they were able to manage that. Now, the biggest thing that Tennessee has in their corner for Amarius Mims, I think they've got 2 things right now. One is they can pitch Will Friend, and they can go look at Wanya Morris and look at Darnell Wright. These were 2 guys that were 5-star tackles. They were highly rated. They were in different stages of polish when they got here, and they have come in and not even really just done what they were expected to do. They've exceeded expectations that were very, very high. And part of that is because of Will Friend. Will Friend has done an outstanding job at developing offensive linemen through his career. He's really done an outstanding job of it at Tennessee. He has identified talent well there. He is a tremendous part of why Tennessee has been able to turn this offensive line around. And you can make the case right now, especially with Pittman being at Arkansas as the head coach now. Name me an offensive line coach off the top of your head and shoulders above Will Friend, because he is firmly in the discussion as the most decorated, the most experienced, and the best offensive line coach in America right now. And I think that's something that Tennessee has got the opportunity to pitch. The other thing that's going to keep Tennessee in this the whole time is Cody Brown. Cody Brown, the 4-star running back in Tennessee, has committed out of Lilburn, Georgia. Brown and Mims are good friends. They are very close. Tennessee has wanted Brown and Mims for a long time. Georgia really was hot and cold on Brown. And as long as Tennessee has got Cody Brown in this class, and he is solidly in this class, as long as that's the case, he's going to be in Amarius Mims' ear. We've seen that on social media. You know it's happening in real life when they're getting to see each other. Brown's going to keep Tennessee in this, and he is going to make it difficult for Mims to ignore Tennessee. So that those two things are going to play down the stretch and will be interesting, especially if Tennessee does decide they want to move Darnell Wright to guard, which going into the 2021 season, as good as Darnell Wright is at tackle, if you feel like you need someone to replace Trey Smith at guard, maybe that tackle spot does open up. Maybe you do feel like you want to be willing to move him. And I think that changes things. So this is one that I don't think is necessarily going to be over when Mims commits. I think this one could go on for a while. But if Tennessee does miss on Amarius Mims, I think the Vols can still land a really, really good offensive tackle. They're in a good spot with Diego Pounds out of North Carolina. And you and I we've talked a little bit about Pounds on the podcast before. As a self-proclaimed offensive line nerd, Diego Pounds' film is just marvelous. I mean, it is outstanding. 6'8", over 300 pounds, moves like he's a tight end, athletic. His feet are fantastic. His technique is good. He has good hand punch. He plays with good leverage. He doesn't grab. He doesn't hold. He stays back into his stance and absorbs that blow and punches someone out. Plays a little too high at times when he's run blocking, but that's most high school offensive linemen, and it's pretty much everybody that's 6'8", and he does it very rarely. He plays with really good pad level for his height. His offer list is fantastic. You've got most of the SEC has offered him. He's got offers from the Ivy League. Princeton wants him. He's very intelligent on and off the field. I really like Diego Pounds a lot. And this is a guy that it's kind of the same situation that we were talking about with Georgia. If you miss on Mondon going with Dumas Johnson, you hate to call Diego Pounds a consolation prize, because this is a kid that I think before it's over with, at most schools he'd be a crown jewel in a recruiting class. He's good. Mims is more probably athletically gifted than Pounds is. But Mims is raw. Mims has played tight end for a good bit of his high school career. Matter of fact, most of his junior year, he was kind of playing as a tight end. He's an incredible athlete for his size, but he's very raw, which, again, is one thing I'm sure Tennessee is pitching. Hey, look, the only thing you're missing is technique. We've got one of the best teachers of offensive line technique in the nation here. We can maximize your physical talent. But when you look at Pounds is a lot more polished than Mims is right now. His technique is better. And you can go watch both of them on film. His technique is better than Mims right now. Mims is probably the better athlete, and Pounds is a very good one. Mims is still better. But this is a really good football player that Tennessee is in a really good spot with. If they wound up landing Mims and Pounds, you'd probably have to scrape Will Friend off the ceiling.
Yeah, I think Pounds in this case would be like you said, an excellent quote-unquote consolation prize. He's very gifted. He's not the 3-star that he's rated right now on.
Not even close.
I was shocked in the last update he didn't get a 4th star. He's right on that borderline. He's, I think, on their regular 247 rankings, he's an 89, which is right on the border of being a 4-star. He's close to it. But he back in May 8th, so about 2 months ago at this point, he had a top 15 of, and there's some interesting schools in there, but most of this is powerhouse schools. I mean, Tennessee made the list, but you also had Alabama, LSU, Auburn, Florida, Penn State, Oregon, Michigan. I mean, those are the teams that are in there. You also had Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, Louisville, Duke, NC State. So, I mean, in Appalachian State, which that was an interesting choice there too. But, I mean, those are some powerhouse schools. Those are teams, obviously Alabama, LSU, Florida, Penn State, Michigan. Those are teams that are challenging their divisions, their conferences, and for the playoff every single year. He has legit offer lists. I mean, he doesn't just hold offers from these schools. He has legit, committable offers from most of these schools. He has offers from. He has offers from like 36 universities. I mean, he has a huge, extensive offer list. He's the real deal. I think. I think he's just very underrated. I think he's a 4-star on ESPN maybe, which is interesting because I think we talked about him specifically on this podcast before about ESPN having a couple guys rated where we think they should be, and the other sites, Rivals and 247 Sports, not. So I think it's interesting that he is a 4-star on there. But I like Diego Pounds a lot. I also like, we talked about William Parker before at a pro cone. I think Tennessee has a good shot with him, but I think, as you said, they're in a really good spot with Pounds, and it's just a matter of, don't know when he, is going to make an announcement or anything like that, but he's a huge kid with, I think, a lot of upside, a lot of good potential. The other big target on Tennessee's list who made an announcement over the weekend, might have been on Friday. I don't remember if it was Friday or Saturday when he announced it now, but Payton Page announced on Twitter, that he is going to be committing later this month on July 28th. He has previously announced a final trio of Tennessee, Clemson, and North Carolina. It seems like North Carolina, they're trying to make a move there with him and trying to get him, convince him, hey, stay home. We've got this really solid recruiting class. We'd love for you to stay home and add to it. You can be really close to your family. You can really I think less than an hour away from home this way if you come to the Tar Heels. But it seems like Tennessee and Clemson are kind of ahead of North Carolina at this point, and it also feels like right now, as things stand, at 3 weeks away from his announcement, that I think Clemson leads for him right now. That could obviously change. At one point, it seemed like Tennessee had a little bit more momentum there, but Brandon, unless I'm wrong, I think Clemson's the team that possibly ends up getting Payton Page's commitment at this point.
We see so many recruiting battles, and there's a lot of times when we're looking at these things, and there may be 4 or 5 teams listed, but really and truly it comes down to, we all know it's going to be one team. The interesting thing with Page on this one is that you can make a really solid, legitimate case for every one of these teams.
Yeah.
I think Page's number one team is Clemson. If Clemson decides they want Payton Page, that's where he's going to go. Now, there have been it's kind of sounded like Clemson's not sure if they want him or not. And it's not really so much that Page it's not that they question Page as a player, nothing like that. It's that when you look at the defensive front that Clemson runs, it's 4 big athletic defensive linemen. They run a 4-man front. Even their defensive tackles can run. Usually they have one guy who's 305, 310, and even he can rush the passer. And they usually play with a smaller defensive tackle next to him that's quicker and more of a pass rusher, and they rotate those guys. That's not Payton Page. Page is 6'5", 6'6", 360 pounds right now. Clemson doesn't use a lot of guys of that size. He doesn't necessarily fit their mold. There have also been rumblings that Clemson's a little concerned with his weight, that they're afraid he's playing too heavy and that he's too big, and they're not sure that even if they get his weight to a healthy, I don't want to say healthy, but if they get his weight where they want it to his playing weight, what it should be, they're still not sure that he's going to fit in the scheme. Clemson has apparently talked with him about maybe looking at him as a guard instead of a defensive lineman. That has apparently come up. But if Clemson wants Payton Page, from everything that I've heard, from everything that we've seen, if Clemson says, hey, we want you, that's probably where Page is going to go. Sounds like Clemson's not sure. They're not sure in evaluating him. They've not made up their mind yet, and they kind of have some questions about where he fits, and he may not be a take there right now. If Page is not a take at Clemson, this gets really, really interesting, because Tennessee makes all the sense in the world. But I'm not betting against Mac Brown and a North Carolina kid in this class.
No, I'm not
because they have gotten almost everybody in the state of North Carolina they wanted this year. The only team to beat them out for a few guys happens to be Tennessee, though. So that gets interesting. You know, we came into this several months ago when we started talking about this 2021 class. We were talking about how important North Carolina was going to be, the state of North Carolina was going to be to Tennessee in this class, because we expected them to pull a lot of guys out of there. They had a lot of targets there. They had a lot of guys they really, really wanted in North Carolina, and that was going to be a big deal for them. And man, North Carolina has kept just about all of them home.
Yeah, a lot of them.
Mac Brown and the other guy in this that's not getting enough credit, who I fully expect to become the head coach when Mac Brown does retire, Dre Bly. You want to talk about just a killer job of recruiting, of selling that program, of putting guys in positions to be successful on the field too. Let's not forget that. This was a very good team last year with Mac Brown coming back. And Brown has been successful here before. Dre Bly is Mr. North Carolina. He was so good there as a player. He had the long, successful NFL career. He is really – they just landed a 5-star cornerback that Tennessee wanted in Tony Grimes.
Yep.
A 5-star cornerback that everybody in the country wanted. And Dre Bly is able to play a big factor in pulling him to North Carolina. So – it is really hard to bet against Mac Brown in North Carolina on a North Carolina kid that they want this year. But the only team that's really been able to go head-to-head and get them so far has been Tennessee. So let's look at kind of how this fits schematically. North Carolina also runs a 4-man front. They don't have that big nose tackle. Now, is that something they would like to run? They just don't have the personnel for it? Or is it not really their scheme? From what I have seen of watching North Carolina play, and I've not watched them a ton, I got to watch them a few times last year, I think they want that more athletic defensive front as well. Let's look at what Tennessee does. Payton Page is the nose tackle in this class. You have a role in Knoxville the day you step foot on campus if you're Payton Page. You have a job. You are either going to start or you're in the rotation as a freshman. You are going to play. Now, Tennessee's probably going to ask you to lose some weight, but his skill set fits what Tennessee needs in that nose tackle spot to a T. And they would really like to land another one, because I think they would like the ability to maybe move Katron Evans around a little bit. I think Evans can be a nose tackle. I think they want to leave themselves some flexibility to move him around a little. He could play at end for Tennessee a little bit if he wanted to. Elijah Simmons is another guy that's on the roster that's going to be in that discussion. But if you're Payton Page and you come to Tennessee, if you take care of your business and handle it like you should, you show up ready to play, you're in the rotation at nose tackle as a true freshman, period, the end. You got a chance to start there. I think it's the best match for his skill set and for his size, for the kind of player that he is. If you look at what Page is probably going to be in the NFL if he gets there, it's going to be that big nose tackle type player. Mm-hmm. And he gets the opportunity to do that at Tennessee and develop into that. So I think Tennessee makes the most football sense for Page. The Vols have been right there in it all along. It does sort of feel like it's a 1-2-3 of Clemson and then Tennessee and then North Carolina. They're all pretty close, but they're pretty distinctly in that order. It's going to come down to, does Clemson want him or not? I think it's going to come down to, does Clemson want him or not? Is he a take at Clemson? it kind of sounds like he's not right now. If just because they have some concerns about his weight, they have some concerns about his size, concerns about him fitting into their defense. None of that is really a knock on Page. I'm not trying to come down on the young man at all. He's going to have questions about weight wherever he goes. If you're 360 in high school, however big you are, there's going to be questions, and that's going to be something that teams monitor. But he doesn't really fit what Clemson does, and I think that's coming into play as well. Where at Tennessee, that weight's not going to be anywhere near the question that it is at Clemson, because he fits what Tennessee wants him to do right there. So if he's not a take at Clemson, I really like Tennessee's chances. But you were saying earlier about Tennessee fans being nervous about Gus Malzahn and Auburn. Man, I don't like Mac Brown waiting in the bushes this year on a North Carolina kid. Like, that's making me uneasy.
And Tennessee's lost their fair share of battles head-to-head with Clemson too on the trail over the last few years. So it's kind of a picker poison kind of battle with two of these three guys we mentioned here on the podcast. And Brandon, really quickly here to kind of close out this episode, staying on the defensive front here. If Tennessee doesn't get Page here in 3 weeks, if he ultimately commits to Clemson, or if North Carolina, if Clemson doesn't take him and North Carolina makes a move and he ends up going there, I look at really the board has really shrunk for Tennessee on the defensive front over the last few days. You had Mason Smith, the 5-star, who I think Tennessee, they were a long shot contender for him anyway, but he eliminated them and cut down his list of top teams, and Tennessee didn't make the cut. Leonard Taylor, another 5-star, who I think is probably destined for one of the Florida schools. He trimmed down his list again. He plays down at Miami, and he didn't include Tennessee. Again, I kind of thought Tennessee was a little bit of a longer shot there. But that, not huge surprises, but also just, it just shows that Tennessee's board shrinking. To me, if they don't get Page, I look at where Tennessee's looking at in this defensive line class as of right now. And like I said, this, depending on how high school football goes this year, guys can emerge on the defensive line. I think D-line and O-line are kind of two spots that you really see guys pop up more as, camps and stuff would have happened. Or as seasons go on. But to me, that leaves Tywone Malone, who I don't feel great about Tennessee getting, but they're certainly in that battle. And then I had Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, who I just worry about him, man. It felt like Tennessee was going to be able to get his commitment when he was going to announce earlier this summer. He pushed it back. It wouldn't surprise me to see him wait until signing day or early signing period, whenever he decides when he's going to sign. It wouldn't surprise me at all for him to wait it out and not announce until then. Other than those two, I don't really, just going through the defensive tackle list of on 247 Sports, there isn't really anyone else who really sticks out to me that Tennessee's really been pursuing very heavily right now. And obviously you could take a strong side defensive end or something like that and move them to tackle, but definitely no one else like Page in this cycle that Tennessee's pursuing. But outside of those two, with Ingram-Dawkins and Malone, Tennessee's defensive tackle board is shrinking, and unless there's someone I'm missing that you want to bring up, they may, if they miss on Page, I think they're going to be swinging for those two, and if they don't get those two, they might just have to make do with having both Evans and Washington in this class.
There's a couple other ways Tennessee could go. I do think that there's a little more wiggle room on defensive tackle, not much. Of course, like you mentioned, Tywone Malone. I actually think Tennessee might be in a better spot with Malone. And a really important thing in Tywone Malone's recruitment is going to be that he's a two-sport athlete.
Yeah.
And he's not just a two-sport athlete that he plays one and he's going to college for the other. He's going to play college baseball as well.
Yeah, he is actually a pretty good baseball prospect as well, especially for how huge he is. He's a pretty good baseball prospect. 6'5",
6'6", 305 pounds, and plays first base. Listen, if you've ever played baseball, that's the size of dude you want to throw to on first base. Because if you make a mistake, he's still going to get to it, and if he gets a hold of a ball, it's going to orbit. Just because he's massive, he's just an enormous, massive human being, all kinds of power. That's very interesting. And Tony Vitello don't look now, but Tony Vitello is quietly putting together a baseball powerhouse at Tennessee. That's a team that I think, had they gotten their season this year, was about to blow some people on their backsides with how good they were about to be.
Yep.
The recruits seem to love Vitello. I think this is going to be a similar situation, and I think we're going to see Rick Barnes play a factor in some of Tennessee's recruiting before this season's over. I think you're going to see Rick Barnes play a factor in some of Tennessee's football recruiting this season before this class is completely signed like he did last year. I think you're going to see that this year. I think this season and next season you're going to see Tony Vitello play a part in Tennessee's football recruiting. That's an asset for Tennessee. Another interesting part about Malone is he goes to the same high school Jarrett Garantano attended.
Yep.
So there is a little bit of a tie there as well. He's also in the Northeast, where we know that Joe Osave has got such good ties. So that's an interesting one for Tennessee. I think the longer that one goes, that might actually start trending in Tennessee's favor. Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins is going to be a fight. Everybody in the nation wants him. I think the Vols are in a really good spot there. I wouldn't be stunned if they lose him. Wouldn't be stunned if they landed him. I think they are probably one of the teams that have got the best shot at him. Two guys that I think you could come back to. One is Jamond Gordon. Jamond Gordon at one time had committed to Tennessee, I
always forget about him. Yeah.
He had released a graphic saying he was committed. He quickly took it down, said he wasn't committed. There was some discussion about did the coaching staff take his commitment? Did they not? Nobody really knew. Listen, go watch this kid's film at East Mississippi Community College because he's good. he's really good. I'm going to cut down the film really quick so you know exactly what it looks like. There's going to be a man on him, and he's going to drive him 3 yards into the backfield, come across his face, and hit somebody for a loss. Because it's 7 minutes of that. That's his tape. He can beat double teams. Now, he's a little smaller. He's not going to be the nose tackle that Tennessee wants. You talk about maybe you could put some weight on him, but I think 285 to 290 is where they would like to keep him. He's a little small for a nose tackle. He's a really valuable defensive end. Maybe you land a guy who is a valuable defensive end in Tennessee's 3-4 scheme. It frees somebody else up who could play tackle or end to be the nose tackle. The last guy I want to come back to is a guy we have briefly mentioned, but is William Parker. Parker plays both ways at Pearl-Cohn, and he is a nose tackle at Pearl-Cohn. And at 330 pounds, he is frighteningly athletic. He is really good on defense. I've had the chance to watch him play live a couple of times, and he impressed me enormously on offense and defense both times that I saw him. Moves very, very well for that size, uses his hands well, plays a little too high on both sides of the ball at times, but has the strength to overcome it. At the next level, they're going to coach him on that. They're going to get his pad level down. But he has the size to be that nose tackle Tennessee wants. He's big enough to do that and to do it well. He does that. He plays that role for Pearl-Cohn quite a lot. Now, I know it's a step up in competition, but the ability is there. That gives you the opportunity for Tennessee to go, well, maybe if you landed a couple of offensive tackles or you felt better about your offensive line class, maybe you have the ability to move Parker from offensive tackle to nose tackle if you want to. He's a guy that can be a really valuable signee on either side of the ball. He can help at two positions of need for Tennessee in this class. I think he can be a right tackle, and I think he can be a nose tackle for the Vols. So he gives you some versatility in who else you sign, which is one more reason they really want to land him.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. I forgot he does play on both trenches in high school. So that's a good point. And last little point here about Tony Malone. I was looking up as you were talking, some notable big baseball players, and he's in that range of like a Frank Thomas, not quite an Aaron Judge because Judge is 6'7", but Frank Thomas, what Mark McGuire was too, about 6'4", 6'5". Thomas was 6'5", 275. So he's built. And I watched some of his I guess videos he had put out recently of him doing some baseball here in the summer. man, he even looks like, I mean, he looks like one of those big guys that, like a Frank Thomas, where he's just, man, it's just something else watching him, a guy like him, play baseball. So
he's got a nice cut for a big man. It's a smooth swing. I mean, it's a D1. It's a D1. You watch him swing a bat and go, that's a major league swing. Like it's not got that hitch in it. It doesn't. The size and the muscles and all the strength of being as huge as he is doesn't get in the way of that swing. And when you find those guys, because there's not many of them, but when you find those guys, they usually hit a whole lot of home runs and make a whole lot of money in the majors.
Yeah, and he's going to be interesting to watch. I do hope for Tennessee's sake that it does keep going longer and longer, because as you said, that is probably better and better news for Tennessee the longer it goes for him. But I just want to touch on some defensive line prospects, because it doesn't look amazing for Tennessee's chances to get Payton Page, and we've seen a couple of their other targets, eliminate them from contention. So I want to touch on that here as we closed out the podcast. But I think that will be where we'll leave this episode off. Brandon, plug some stuff for VR2. I know you guys over at Sports Illustrated family at VR2. Like I said last time, Matt was over there to watch the Elite 11. You guys have interviewed different prospects and stuff, and you were talking beforehand, and you've got some pretty cool stuff looking at Tennessee's top targets moving forward. So feel free to plug what you guys have coming down the wire at VR2.
Well, in the last few days, we have last week really, we have been to the Elite 11. We've had guys at camps down in Georgia. We've had another camp here in Nashville that we have been able to attend to get film and get interviews and get a look at guys. You can see all of the interviews that have come out from that. We've released a lot of footage already. There are going to be more interviews from those camps, more footage from those camps coming out over the next few weeks. We're going to be looking some at Tennessee's top remaining targets, some by position, some by guys they want, breaking them down a little bit. And we're going to be talking about which freshmen the Vols have added that may have the best shot at getting on the field early this fall. So we got a lot coming down the pipe as some of this camp season, because right now we're seeing camps get scheduled again. So we're going to try to be wherever we can be. If we have the opportunity to go to a camp, we're going to try to go get eyes on guys, have footage, have things to show you. You can find all of that at si.com/college/Tennessee. You can find us on Twitter at _VR2_. You can search for us on Facebook and Instagram, VR2, and you can find me at Brandon_VR2 on Twitter. So we got a lot coming down the pipe. We've had a lot done recently. There's still going to be more coming out of the Elite 11, still more going to be coming out of the other camps that we've been to. So been fun to actually have some real on-field work to evaluate.
Yeah, well, what a concept during this pandemic. Yeah, go check them out. Go check the website out. Go follow them, like he said, on their Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and their Sports Illustrated, part of the Sports Illustrated family as well. You can find us at Rocky Top Insider. We also have Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We're also on YouTube, which is where a lot of you listen to the podcast, so we appreciate that. Give us subscribe to us there, give us a like, and hit the notification bell as well. And we're at RockyTopInsider.com. Signing off for our special guest, Brandon, I am Nathaniel. Thanks again for listening. This has been another episode of the RTI Recruiting Podcast.